Why don't you leave this on the start?
Man. You cannot be serious!
He is a broadcaster, a host, a TV star, performer, a podcast star, a husband, a father, and on the seventh day he rests. He is Dr. Ben Fordham.
Oh, wow.
And
good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Sam Newman. How are you, my friend?
Well, good. Now, I heard you interview a person who was the next of kin or the relatives of a young girl who took her own life, a 12-year-old girl, and I listened to your interview, and Doc, I don't usually, maybe because I'm getting older, but there was a pretty emotional interview, and it actually brought a tear to my eye. You must have had tremendous feedback from it.
Yeah, Sam, it's one of those things that you come across and it just floors you, and that's what happened last week. Someone had told me that there is a school in Sydney, Santa Sabina College, and that a girl had committed suicide. And I can still remember, Sam, when I heard about a 17-year-old killing themselves, and we're all like, 17? What's going on in the world? Then there was a girl who was 14, her name was Dolly, and that was one of those cases that really, captured everyone's attention a few years ago, and I know they've set up a great foundation off the back of Dolly's suicide. This is a 12-year-old girl called Charlotte, 12 years old, not even in her teenage years yet. She was in year 7 at Santa Sabina College, and she was bullied. And her family had been telling the school for a number of years in writing, and a lot of those emails are published in the Sydney Morning Herald today. It'll be in The Age as well in Melbourne. And it's one of these things where the school was told again and again and again, Charlotte is being picked on. You need to break up the group that she's hanging out with because it's a toxic relationship. And the school said to the family, look, we can only do that if there's a health or safety risk. So they wouldn't separate these girls because it was one of these toxic relationships. And I suppose even adults have some of those toxic relationships, but when you're an adult, you're capable of navigating it, hopefully, and working out who your true friends are and who aren't. When you're 12.
So if I may, Doc, I know in America, the parents of people who have their son or daughter who have taken the life of people in schools with a gun, they have been held responsible for not monitoring their children or their offspring more diligently or vigilantly or whatever the word is. Would the school be in a degree of bother for not taking action, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I was thinking about it. I just don't think schools are equipped really to deal with things like this. I mean, the problems are so complex now. And you add social media into the mix as well, whereby, the bullying doesn't stop at 3:30 in the afternoon when the bell rings. You go home, and because of the devices that most kids have, and some of these devices you even need to have just to go to the school, it's relentless. It's 24/7. I think in light of the new complexities around this issue, schools shouldn't be pretending that they are in a position to handle these kind of cases. I think you should have an outside individual who comes in, who specialises in mediation and also child psychology. And what I'd be doing, Sam, I was thinking about it. What if it was your school? If you were running a school, what would you do? And I thought, well, I'd make every student and every parent or guardian sign a contract when they join the school. And if that means a kid scribbling in crayon, so be it. And I would explain that this is a contract that explains this is what the rule is, this is the way this school operates. And if there are any hints of problems involved with bullying, you're going to come in straight away. Mum and Dad are obliged to turn up at the school. We'll bring the other people involved all into one room and we'll resolve it. And if someone needs to strike against their name for doing it, it's 3 strikes and you're out. Well, and every time there's another infringement, you just call them in and say, hey, listen, here's the contract. You signed it. At the moment, schools are particularly worried about wealthy parents who have access to expensive lawyers. And there are many cases, Sam, where at rich private schools particularly, some kid will be on the ropes for bullying and the school's thinking about kicking them out. And then mum and dad say, well, hang on, show me the due diligence you've done on our child's case, and have you given them a right of reply, and have you adopted fairness to the circumstances of this expulsion. And before long, of course, the school hasn't done all of that because you got teachers and other people, counsellors and principals dealing with these things. They're not going to have all of their ducks in a row. The parents then threaten them with the lawyers and the kid remains at the school. And poor Charlotte, mate, I'll just tell you something. I met with her family yesterday, her mum and her stepdad. And the stepfather, Matthew, said to me, mate, a couple of years ago we were on holiday and we were walking around going to dinner and there's a few kids in the family, including a little baby now who's only 18 months. And Charlotte just loved her baby brother, William. But they were walking to dinner and Charlotte kind of said, hey, Matt, can you drop back a bit? So he dropped back with her as they're strolling to dinner and she said, would it be okay if I started calling you Dad? And he said to her, Charlotte, that's the nicest question that anyone has ever asked me in my whole life. This was a really special young lady. And she's gone now, and we're never going to know exactly why. And chances are the girls who bullied her did not understand what they were doing. And Sam, Charlotte left a suicide note.
Man.
I've read the suicide note. She names 3 girls at school.
Wow.
And she says, please tell the school. Charlotte's family do not want any retribution against those 3 girls. They're only 12 years of age. And Charlotte's mum, Kelly, now fears that if all of a sudden these girls' lives were turned upside down, then they could be in danger themselves at such a delicate age. And she doesn't want them growing up feeling guilty about what's happened here, for the rest of their lives. What they want, Sam, they want the school to measure up and to say, well, hang on, we're the adults in the room here. We need to behave like adults and we need to treat these situations appropriately, not the way they're being done at the moment.
Well, I can just tell you this, Doc. My son went to a very prominent public school and he's just finished a long, drawn-out court case about exactly the same thing that's happened to him. And that's been settled now with the school. But he suffered tremendous grief, whether he is my son or not as a result, or whether they just honed in on him. So that I have some understanding of how that affects people. How did Charlotte end her life?
Mate, I haven't shared that information, and I don't have permission from the family
fair enough.
too.
But
good.
That's good. I just
put it this way. But put it this way. That's a fair question to ask. But it's put it this way. She went to bed on the Monday night, and the mum went in there on the Tuesday morning, and she wasn't in bed. And then she had a little ensuite off her room, and she was in the ensuite.
Oh wow!
And they're convinced that she didn't know what she was doing. They're convinced that this was one giant mistake that she made, and she didn't realise that this was actually going to kill her, but it did. And she left a note. She also left another note for her 18-month-old baby brother, William, for William to read when William's older. And in the other note that she left, she also said to her parents, live for Will. And that's probably a 12-year-old girl sensing that this may well lead to her parents being so heartbroken that they could end their lives. So she left a message for them to say, live for Will.
So I'm sitting here with Sue Stanley. It's very hard to speak to you without getting a tick in your voice, Doc. Just so remote from just what you say is it's very hard to actually.
Well, I'll tell you, Sam, and I feel
Sue's got a tear in her eye. It's a bit hard to say this without choking up.
And you know what? We have many chats, Sam, and g'day to Sue as well, Sue. And I'd love to hear what you've got to say about it, Sue, because I'm sure that you've got thoughts on it. But it's one of these things that once in a while conversations come along. We don't choose them; they choose us. And what happened over the weekend was when I started talking about this on radio last week, I hadn't heard from the family. I got word of what had happened, and I used the word bullying, and I said it's my information that bullying was at play here. Then over the weekend, I received emails from Charlotte's family, from several of them, and they said, "Thank you for mentioning the word bullying, and this is what happened to our daughter." And I then thought to myself, I can't receive emails like that. I'm supposed to be on holidays this week for 1 week because it's just the way the radio schedule or diary works out, where we're all on leave this week. But I thought to myself, I called the bloke who fills in for me, Mark Levy, on the Saturday, and I said, "Mate, I think you should have a sleep in Monday morning. I'm going to go in and do the show Monday, because I think after receiving a note like this, I wouldn't feel comfortable just forwarding it on to you or to anyone or sitting on it." You know, I felt like Charlotte left a note for a reason. She wanted her voice heard. And once I was aware of that, I thought, well, I'm going to play a role here. And yes, there'll be other people who'll be able to state their own position about what they did or what they didn't do. Charlotte's family want to keep the focus on the school, not the other girls. But all I know is that this young girl wanted to be able to say something, and I wanted to help out and do it with her. And it's been a really interesting experience, even with my kids. My kids said, you know, they were overhearing me on the phone and whatever. So it's been quite interesting in our household.
Doc, I was going to say, you got to get some commendation for gathering up the strength to even do it yourself, mate. I know it's a minor thing in the overall scheme of things, but for you to actually have to confront it, you must have had to gather yourself.
That's why in the audio you listen to, you'll hear I was doing okay until I read out on the night that Charlotte took her own life. She was communicating with one of her friends, and she sent a message to the friend, a photo of herself crying, and she said, "Sorry." And then the friend wrote back, "Sorry for what?" And there was no reply. And then I started reading out that dialogue from the screenshot that I had of Charlotte, answer me, Charlotte. You're scaring me. And as I was reading that out, I broke down on air, because you just can't, you know, it's times like that, some things when it's just the way it is, and there's different things that set you off. And funnily enough, it was that one-way conversation from her friend. And mate, this is a sign of how there are good people out there, Sam. That friend who was in that conversation that was only one way because Charlotte had already taken her own life, her dad, Jason, contacted me over the weekend, and he said, "Mate, I know that she was being bullied because she was telling my daughter." And so he goes, "My daughter's too distraught, but I want to stand up to be counted for these people and for this girl. So if you need me to do anything, you tell me where I need to be and when." So I said, "All right, well, I'm going to go. I'm not supposed to be on air on Monday, but I'm going to go on." I said, "Mate, if I'm going in, do you want to come in?" And he goes, "I'll see you at 8 o'clock. And he came in and he told the story, because he wanted to stand up for Charlotte and Charlotte's parents to go, look, they're too devastated to tell the story, but I know what was happening to her because she was telling my daughter, right?" So, and now in the Sydney Morning Herald today, you see, Sam, here's the other interesting thing. The school came out and said, these reports that I'm putting on radio are inconsistent with our records. Well, today
extraordinary they would even be defending the indefensible. That is just shows you how arrogant and pompous, how ridiculous that is. Even if it might be the case to even say it, just in the climate that's prevailing at the minute.
Yeah, and so in the Herald today, I shared with the Sydney Morning Herald reporter Jordan Baker, and this will be on the Age website as well. 9 emails back and forth between Charlotte's parents and the school over a 2-year period. And then on the day that Charlotte took her own life, her mum sent a 10th where she just absolutely unloaded on the school and called it out for what it was and their lack of action. The only thing I'd say in defence of the school is I'm convinced, Sam, that, you know, we've seen how dramatically workplaces have changed over the last 10, 20 years, right, even the last 5 years, right, I'm convinced that you'll see a big change in schools where they'll have to go a bit more corporate, and you're better off having someone who adjudicates these things and determines them, who's not the principal. For example, at Channel 9 at the moment, there's an internal cultural review going on. Well, they don't have someone from level 2 do it, because chances are the bloke on level 2 knows someone who they're going to have to review. You bring in an outside party who's independent from the principal and whatever, and they can put contracts in front of people and say, look, Sam, this is what we signed up to, mate, and here we are now for a second time. And as you know, on the third time you come in with mum and dad, and you've got to drag the parents to the table too and go, if the parents don't front up because they think it's all too hard, well, that's a clause in the contract as well. They must show up.
Now,
so everyone's involved, and if because otherwise you have situations like with your son, and mate, I admire your son for taking them on. I've said to kids before who I've spoken to who've been repeatedly bullied, and I've said to parents when I've spoken to them about it, they go, what do we do? The school's doing nothing. I go, right, I'll tell you what to do. Next time that's the case, and these are severe cases where kids were being belted up at school, right? I said, next time you pick up your kid and you find out that they've been belted up at school again and you've told the school 100 times, ring the cops, stay at the school, ring the cops, get the blue flashing lights up there to take a statement from the kid, and then you'll see a different reaction from the school, right? They want to deal with a lot of these things behind the scenes, but they're going to have to do better than what they're doing at the moment, because otherwise there'll be more people like your son who'll say, all right, well, I'll square up, quite rightfully, for the atrocious treatment of me all those years ago in court as an adult when I've had time to collect myself and think about the impact that it's had on me.
Now,
and I admire the fact that your son has stood up.
Yes, so yeah, no, knocked him around a bit. So now Sue is here. I don't know.
Hey, Sue.
So
hey, Ben.
And I this is absolutely off the top of my head. Sue went up to and I'm not suggesting this organisation. I'm just saying she went up as a young girl to the AIS and on her own. And I'm just wondering, not at that institution, I'm wondering if she's ever experienced any form of this that's going on, because I know you've been sitting here listening to this and you probably find it hard to speak to the doctor.
Well, I think anyone who's different, and I was always different as a kid, whether you're a tomboy, which you don't fit in with all the girls who wear the dresses and they do their hair and their makeup, whatever. I was into sport, the other girls were hanging out with boys and things like that. So I was always different. I never came across a lot of people, but I was never included. So I was always a loner at school. Yeah. That's probably where, I wasn't bullied per se, but I was different and never fitted in. But a lot of those people do succeed. But I want to know where the parents are, and have any of these kids who did the bullying, have they come forward to address the issue?
Here's the thing. There's a chance that the girls won't be spoken to in normal circumstances like this, and I'll tell you why. The police won't tell the school that there are 3 girls named in the suicide note. Right, so I know that as a fact, that the police did not tell the school, hey, listen, here are 3 names that are mentioned in Charlotte's suicide note. They did not tell the school. Now, I'd hazard a guess, and it's only a guess, that that's protocol, because it would be viewed as a privacy issue of also potentially inflicting harm on 3 other 12-year-olds who may or may not be guilty of doing this, right? Yep. Because keep that in mind as well, right? There's always that presumption of innocence and whatever. So for whatever reason, it's not passed along. And then, but that makes it very hard then for a school to know how to respond to something like this and who that they should be keeping an eye on for more than one reason. One reason because they're potential bullies, and a second reason is because right now they might be feeling like they caused the death of a 12-year-old girl who at times has been their friend, and that puts them in danger. So, look, it's a terrible situation. I'm not pretending it's easy. It's not. But I think when things like this come up, and it's the nature of the conversation we're having today, which is very different to our normal ones, but then there's nothing wrong with that. I think, light and shade in life is a good thing, and sometimes things can get really dark. And, I've had a bit of that this week sitting down with Charlotte's family, but I've just said to them, look, at a time like this when everything's coming at you, feel free. I've got this week off, so feel free to fling a few things my way and I can, give them a bit of a hand. And they're just good people, when you meet people. And, I gave them a hug. They turned up outside my house and gave them a hug, and we went around to a cafe and we sat down there.
Wow.
Kelly was shaking for the first 5 or 10 minutes. When we walked back up the hill, she started crying, and I put my arm around her. Matt had been holding her hand for, most of the time we're sitting in the cafe, and they're going to come on radio with me on Monday next week, which is very brave of them. I don't know whether Kelly will be well enough to speak, but Matt has particularly said, he goes, oh, no, mate, I'm angry, I'm upset, but more than anything, I'm not silent, and I refuse to be. And I know that Charlotte wanted something done. She made that clear in her own words. And I said, well, mate, that's how I feel, so let's do it. So they'll be coming in on Monday, and they're
So I know you don't want people to say this, but I'm saying it, Doc. You are to be absolutely congratulated for your compassion and your civic responsibility because you're a star and you're a big name, and I know, I'm just saying, and to take.
No, I know, I appreciate that, but as mate, I'll just tell you, and you would know this just as much as I do, mate. All you got to do is look around your own home, and you kind of look at. I look around and count 1, 2, 3, and you just kind of think, all right, well, and that's what makes you want to do that kind of thing, because you just think, all right, well, if the person was living next door to me, I would, or across the road. So it doesn't matter where they are or who they are. It's just like the same way that, and the parents have told me, actually, they've said, you should see some of these messages that we've received from people. I'll share this one with you, Sam, because on stories like this, I heard someone say once, look for the helpers. Look for the helpers. In the middle of a tragedy, there's always someone running in to help if you're trying to look for a little bit of inspiration in the middle of all the darkness. But out of all the messages they received, there was one that was particularly powerful, and they showed it to me over a coffee yesterday morning. And it was a mother from the same school who'd written to Kelly, and she explained that her daughter had been bullied for years by 4 girls at Santa Sabina College. And in the last 24 hours, all 4 girls had approached her daughter and apologised. So they've obviously seen what's happened to Charlotte, these 4 girls. They're completely separate from Charlotte's case. They realised, hang on a moment, we're doing that to such and such. And they went and fronted up and took responsibility as young teenage girls, in this case, to say, we're really sorry.
But isn't it part where you really, if you voice yourself, and she didn't obviously want to be singled out as being bullied, but she's actually gone out there, and if we call people out all the time, or we're always asked to call people out, so why is it so fearful in a school? Like, is it peer group pressure, or is it social media, or is it the on effect or anything? Because people are happy to call out people who have got an opinion, whether it's right or wrong, and not investigate it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but it's just, I think what happened with Charlotte is that Charlotte revealed a really personal part of her family history to some girls at school when she was 10. So when she was in year 5, 10 years old, trying to bond with people as you do. You imagine young girls and they're getting to know each other and whatever. And Charlotte...
they've exploited it.
Yeah, they've exploited it.
Yeah, Doc, it's pretty. I had a couple of other things I wanted to speak to you about.
No, that's all right.
Just finally, just on this, you just said you're tending, I think, to think about what the US are doing. You said that you'd get you would get the signatories of the parents and the kids at the school to say, if this happens, you will be held responsible. You're sort of going down that track, holding the people, the parents, responsible for the conduct of their underage children. Surely.
Yeah, and look, I'm not a huge believer in that, because I know of families where you have the sweetest, most diligent parents and just shithead kids, right, who you cannot control, right? Like I do know those cases. So But what I would say is it's just easier to kick a kid out of your school with a contract. That's the bottom line. It's business. It's like, listen, buddy, sign on the dotted line. This is what are you signing up to, so that there's no doubt, and you can just say to the parents, you signed on. These are our rules. It's time to go, and it'll make it easier. And then it puts more pressure on the bullies. That's when the parents of the bullies start firing up and saying, I'm not going to go through this again and have to move you from one school to another. At the moment, it's the kids who are bullied who are the ones who are encouraged to go and find another school. I even had a few years ago the little brother of an ex-girlfriend who was being horrifically bullied at school, and in the end, after many interactions between the parents and the school, they suggested maybe would it be better for the boy, the bullied boy, to find another school, right? So the bullies remained, and the school even said, look, the bullies are boarders at this school, and they're from the country, and we're going through the drought, right? So their families are under lots of pressure, right? They're under a lot of pressure, so they defended the bullies, and the bullied kid was asked to find another, or recommended to find another school, which he did. Later on, get this, you'll like this, Sam. Later on, the headmaster of that prestigious school wrote a book, and in it he was talking about his expert advice on how to handle bullying. So I got him on air, and while I was interviewing him, I told him about Henry. And I said, why is it that at your own school, you encourage the kid being bullied to find another school and you protected the bullies? So it was a very uncomfortable interview, and I was suggesting that maybe he's not such an expert to be writing a book and telling other people how to handle bullies.
Who headmaster of what school? Obviously, he would have told you.
Well, I won't say the school because it might cause me some legal problems, but I will tell you this as a little add-on. This bloke was so well connected, this headmaster, he immediately phoned Alan Jones, who was hosting the 2GB breakfast show. I was doing the drive time show, and he blew up to Alan, right? And to Alan's credit, Alan just let me know about it. He wasn't kind of, he said, I don't know what you've done, but you've really upset this bloke. And I said, well, this is why. Because when it mattered, he didn't stand up.
Yep. And Alan was, he was on your side. He gave you support.
He didn't really, mate. It was more just forwarding on an email and saying, FYI, I think you've pissed this bloke off. So, and I was happy to piss him off. And again, to any teachers who are listening, I don't pretend for a moment that I'd be an expert being thrown in the deep end if I had to do your job tomorrow, or I had to be a principal dealing with young kids, social media, bullying, phones, depression, anxiety, all the other things that seem to inflict the generation of 2024. I'm not pretending it's easy. And if I've sounded like I think it's easy, then I apologise, because I don't think it is. But I think collectively we can do better.
Now, Doc, John, but that's what a half hour that has been, and but I'm just.
Well, thank you, mate. Thanks for letting me have the chat, and I hadn't planned on, as you know, mate. I just call in and we just have a yarn.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to ask.
I'd be lying if I.
I'm going to ask.
I'd be lying if I suggested that it hadn't been dominating my thinking this week.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm going to ask you just one. I just think you owe me an apology. Yep. I know you probably won't apologise on air. You might do it.
Well, I've got a list here. I've got a list here of all the things that I owe you an apology for. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, when I deliver one, I'll tick it on the box on the edge of the list.
Well,
and I'm just having a look down here. There's 16 things here that I owe you an apology for.
Well, the main one...
I have not ticked any box. So it sounds like there's not one coming.
That's my word, there is. You owe me an apology. I've been ahead of the curve on this. They are going to kill Donald Trump before you said it was a conspiracy theory. They've had two goes.
You said it was a conspiracy, you idiot. You said the whole thing was a conspiracy and the Secret Service and the FBI was involved.
They've had two goes at killing him. The third time he will absolutely not make the election. They will take him out somehow. It's the most disgraceful exhibition of law enforcement and turning a blind eye to a political opponent, and why the media, the cowards in the media, why they don't ramp up on this. This is an absolute disgrace to have a bloke allowed to poke a gun through a fence at a golf course when they've just tried to kill him 2 months earlier. This is going deeper and deeper. This is a plan to rid the very popular. He is a great man, Trump. For even imagine how his life is, wandering around knowing 2 people have tried to kill him and someone else will before in the next 50 days.
Well, Sam, obviously it is worrying beyond the extreme that you've had 2 assassination attempts now on Donald Trump. As you know, we called out the Secret Service and their handling of the first incident extensively. I think on the second one, they obviously spotted the bloke straight away and identified the problem and dealt with him and caught him before he was able to get it. Yeah, no, I get that. It's a golf course. You've been to a few of them. You know that the layout of them. You know the layout of them, right? It's when a man is walking around on the golf course, he is a very easy target because it's a huge parcel of land surrounded by bushes. And you cannot have a Secret Service. You cannot have a bouncer around the perimeter. You'd need 40,000 of them. It's a dangerous place to be at the moment, and I would suggest that Donald Trump will reduce his time at golf courses between now.
Well, what a disgrace that is.
I know, but I'll tell you why. Because if someone kills him, it will be World War III in America. And obviously he needs to stay alive between now and Election Day. There are evil people out there who want to kill him. 2 people have either tried or got very close to attempting. I just think he's got to stay alive, and therefore golf courses. Like I spoke to a bloke the other day, Sam, who was once our ambassador to the United States, who's played on that golf course with Donald Trump.
Yep.
And he goes, "Oh, mate," he goes, "it's almost impossible to monitor the whole perimeter at all times." And this guy's hid there for 12 hours, right?
12 hours he had been there, had the gun resting through the bar.
Yeah. And Sam, I'm not saying that he should have to stay away from places like that. It's completely wrong. We're talking about psychopaths with weapons, and every time this happens, it's a disaster for Kamala Harris because it paints her supporters as being, some of them, psychotic, right? She was on stage at the debate last week saying, "I'm a gun owner." When Trump was suggesting that she might take your guns away, she said, "No, I'm a gun owner."
She wanted to take people's... That's why she's such a liar. She wanted to take guns away. She's on record as saying that. She's on record on a million things. She's on record. She's changed the tune
I don't know what we're arguing about, though. What are we arguing about?
Well, anyhow, the man who did it, I got sacked for saying George Floyd was a piece of shit. I got sacked for saying that on this very podcast. So I'm saying it now again about the man Routh, Routh. He is a piece of shit as well. So therefore, there you got them black and white.
And the good thing is no one can sack you anymore.
Hence, I'm saying it. No, Doc. I was.
Hey, you know what I've worked out? I think there's a new book in Sam Newman, Unsackable. Right, and you tell the story of starting this podcast because you couldn't be sacked on here, and then you weave into there. You think of all the interviews you've done with fascinating people, from business people to sporting people to people from the underworld. You imagine then lifting a lot of those stories and incorporating that into a book, Unsackable. Sam Newman.
Doc, if you could just do the forward and run it and edit it and produce it, I'll be happy for you to say it all. Incidentally, we interviewed, I don't know if you've ever heard of Bruce Matheson, have you?
Yes, I have heard of Bruce Matheson.
Well, Bruce owns the majority of poker machines in Victoria, and he's not well, and he is one of... How many millionaires in the world, billionaires in the world do you reckon there are? This is a statistical fact.
How many billionaires?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't think... He is one of 2,700 billionaires in the world.
Right.
That's a pretty select group. I know billion...
Mate, that's a very select group.
Anyhow, I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago. He's not in good health, and he had a fascinating... He was fascinating. He was so honest about his health and where he went to try and prolong his life, and he's still with us. But so this is just to your point that we interview some interesting people. Right. So we haven't put that to air yet. So, but we will. Anyhow,
that's called a tease. That's a tease coming soon to You Cannot Be Serious.
No, you're the tease, Doc. I said to Sue a fortnight ago, I said, I reckon the Doc's warming us up to say he's not going to come on that often. And Sue said, yeah, he seemed to say, you said, I'll come on when I can, but the pressure of business.
No, well, mate, I'm being honest about the fact that
I know you are.
It's mate, I love coming on, and that's why I as you know, I do it as much as I can. It's just one of these things that there are times.
Yes, I know.
When it's probably it's fun for me. It probably makes it less fun for the people around me at times, because all of a sudden I go, whatever they thought they had an hour and a half to do, I go, no, that's all got to be done in 40 minutes.
Would you like us to pay you?
No.
Oh, mate,
no,
I can send a stipend up. I can send an amount. Give us your bank details. Sue's willing to forego her salary.
No. Mate, that's even worse. Then Channel 9 would have cause to see that to stop me from doing it, because they'd say, hang on a moment, you're supposed to be working for us.
Well, see if you can get Channel 9 to give Kamala Harris a belting for the crap that she goes on with and her dishonesty, rather than going at
God.
Trump.
God.
Hey,
well,
Doc.
listen, it's good to hear your voices. And Sue, were you guys back yet, or where are you?
We're coming back to Melbourne on Friday for a week, for the grand final week, and then we're coming back up here to get the boat and bring it home.
Oh, fantastic. Well, love you both, and thanks for the chat.
You star, Doc. You are a star. Good on you, mate.
All right.
See you, man.
Bye-bye.
Love yous all.
Bye-bye.